Two blown saves in 3 days. Craig Kimbrel unavailable with a back issue. Everybody talking down on this Orioles bullpen. And what do? They come through in a huge way, holding on for an Orioles shutout win over the Yankees. And I'll recap it coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Orioles fans, today is Tuesday, April 30th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb, and coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles' huge 2-0 win over the New York Yankees on Monday night to open up even though it's April, crucial 4-game series against the Bronx Bombers. I'll get you the 5 things you need to know from the win, including a great bounce-back start from Grayson Rodriguez, the bullpen getting it done without Kimbrel, and Gunnar Henderson having to basically do everything himself on offense. Then we'll get to some of the Orioles news and notes we got coming out of Monday, starting with Cionel Pérez being activated off the injured list and helping the O's win that game Monday. We'll talk about why Dillon Tate was optioned in his place, and John Means and Kyle Bradish are in Baltimore. We'll chat about when they will officially rejoin the Orioles. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I've got a competitive side, and it is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store or Google Play. So we begin today with an Orioles victory. Final score from Oriole Park at Camden Yards on Monday night in Game 1 of a big-time 4-game series. It's the Orioles 2 and the New York Yankees 0. The O's with the win on Monday night, getting themselves to 18-10. And with the Yankees dropping to 19-11, the two teams once again are tied for first place, sitting atop of the AL East. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from the Orioles win over the Yankees on Monday night. The first thing you need to know is that was a huge bounce-back start for Grayson Rodriguez. We know how bad his last start was last week in Anaheim. It was tough to watch, if we're being honest. He allowed 7 runs on a career-high 11 hits in just 4 1/3 innings in that O's loss to the Angels last week. It wasn't a lot of walks, but he was just throwing BP up there. I mean, he was getting crushed. It was really his worst start since before he got sent down in, basically 2 months into the 2023 season. When he came back up with the O's in July, he never had to start anything close to that bad. So it was really weird seeing like that old version of Grayson Rodriguez. Well, he certainly righted the ship on Monday night. While he wasn't, his most dominant self, certainly he was not. You will take 5 2/3 innings of scoreless baseball against the New York Yankees anytime you go out there. Grayson allows 5 hits, only 3 strikeouts to 3 walks, and it took him 101 pitches, which is why he was pulled from the game with 2 outs in the 5th inning. But Yankees only got 6 hard hit balls against him. He was able to scatter those 5 hits, get some key outs when he really, really needed them. And it just wasn't a swing and miss night for Grayson Rodriguez. He's generally a swing and miss pitcher, just 8 whiffs on 38 swings by Yankee hitters. I mean, he moved them around, fastball, changeup, slider, and curveball, mixed all 4 of his pitches in this one, but didn't have a true dominant strikeout pitch. What he did have is a good amount of called strikes, which helped him out. And I really was impressed with the curveball. Now, he only threw it 10 times out of 101 pitches. It was his 4th most used out of 4 offerings. But on 10 curveballs, he got 1 swing and miss and 4 called strikes. It was kind of a get me over, get me ahead curveball that he used early in counts in this game, which was really impressive to see to keep the Yankee hitters off balance. And I think that really helped him. And honestly, it was kind of interesting because you would think after the start that Grayson had last Tuesday, where he was just, his command was off because he was too right down the middle with a lot of his pitches. You would think he'd be nibbling more, hunting strikeouts, trying to avoid contact because of how hard he got hit last week in Anaheim. It was kind of a different thing. Grayson was hunting contact. He was hunting early outs, and he got a lot of soft contact. He was rewarded for his plan against the Yankees on Monday night, and he got a little lucky, came back out for the 6th inning, threw a 3-2 fastball to lead the inning off against Anthony Rizzo, which was pretty clearly low for ball 4, but he got a called strike 3. Then, with a runner on first and 1 out, Austin Wells hits a line drive into right field for a base hit. Giancarlo Stanton gets a terrible read on it and can't run at all. and Santander throws him out at second for a putout for the second out of the inning. Shout out to the Orioles forcing Gunnar Henderson to play a couple games at first base in AAA at the end of 2022 before they called him up, I should say. Finally, a year and a half later, it has paid off for the Orioles. Nice stretch at second there. And then he allowed another single after he had walked a batter two in the inning, and it was first and second, 2 outs. He was at 101 pitches. You had to pull him. There was no way you were going to let him try to finish the 6 innings right there. He was lucky to get any outs, let alone 2 in that 6th inning. But otherwise, really liked him. A lot more quality strikes this time. So hopefully that one bad start, just kind of an aberration, and it is behind him. Second thing you need to know from Monday's win is maybe the most important thing from this game is that the bullpen held up for the Orioles, something that it hasn't done a lot lately. It held up for the shutout win. And it was mostly protecting a 1-run lead on Monday night. Cionel Pérez was the first one out of the bullpen, making his return, activated off the injured list on Monday. We'll get to that a little bit more in the second segment of the show, but he was good. Came in and got a key out in the 6th to strand 2 runners and keep it at a 1-0 game. And then he comes back out there in the 7th inning, and he did allow a hit, but he got a couple of key outs. The Orioles go to Yennier Cano, which was a tough decision. It was runner on second, 2 down, owes up 1-0 in the 7th inning. Perez had just gotten Juan Soto out, and Aaron Judge was coming to the plate. Perez had only thrown 13 pitches, so even though he's just coming off the IL, you could have theoretically left him in the game. You had the righty Judge coming up with a base open at first, and you had the lefty Anthony Rizzo on deck. Now, generally, I would say just walk Judge. He's done too much damage to the Orioles. Let Perez face the lefty Rizzo. If he doesn't get him out, then you go to Cano for the next righty with Stanton. But Brandon Hyde ends up going to the bullpen, having Cano face Judge. Something that went into this decision is that Judge hasn't been great early this year. And Anthony Rizzo just won American League Player of the Week. He was named that on Monday. He's been red hot. So Hyde said, I'll take my chances with Cano versus Judge. Cano gets a first pitch fly out to end the inning. Then he comes in and gets 3 ground outs in the 8th inning. And then in the 9th, I was pretty on board with all of Brandon Hyde's bullpen decisions in this game, especially late in the game. Craig Kimbrel, unavailable for this game. Orioles decided not to place him on the injured list on Monday, but he did leave Sunday's loss with a little bit of back stiffness. Brandon Hyde said he is day-to-day right now. They're hoping he doesn't have to go on the IL, but what that basically means is he was absolutely not available to pitch on Monday despite being on the active roster, and it was a save situation. Now, luckily, the O's got another run, so it was 2-0 heading into the top of the 9th, but you needed to figure out how to get those 3 outs, and I thought Brandon Hyde did it perfectly. He lets Yennier Cano open the 9th inning against the righty Gleyber Torres. Unfortunately, he hangs a pitch to Torres, who hits one into center for a base hit, and then you go to Danny Coulombe, because after Gleyber Torres, it's the switch hitter Cabrera, who you'd much rather turn around to the right side. It's the lefty Grisham. It's the righty Volpe, and then the lefty Soto. And they were getting Jacob Webb ready just in case Aaron Judge somehow came up to the plate in that 9th inning, but it was going to be Danny Coulombe until then. And although Coulombe wasn't, I'll say, dominant, and there were some pitches certainly over the plate that could have been hit a lot harder. I mean, Oswaldo Cabrera hit a ball a long way, almost 380 feet out to left center field, but hey, new ballpark, just hit it further. It's a fly out. Trent Grisham got a hanging breaking ball. Luckily, he's been terrible this year, and it was just a lazy fly out to center. But Coulombe got the outs he needed. Again, wasn't pretty. He's not a big strikeout guy. At least he didn't look like it in the 9th inning on Monday, but he got the job done, gets the ground out from Volpe. Not only did they not have to face Judge, didn't even have to face Soto in that 9th inning. And the Orioles, without Craig Kimbrel, the bullpen holding up to win it 2-0. Third thing you need to know from that win on Monday night is that Gunnar Henderson supplied the early offense and kind of supplied the only offense in this game for the Orioles. His 3rd leadoff home run of the season came in the bottom of the 1st inning to lead things off against Yankee starter Clark Schmidt, who otherwise was great in this game, did not give up another run after that. But Gunnar went right after him, 3-2 pitch, gets a hanging breaking ball, launches that thing onto the flag court in right field, 112.3 miles per hour off the bat, 410 feet. Gunnar's 10th home run of the season ties him with Mike Trout for the major league lead. That's a pretty good company to be in. And if you're into on pace for what a guy is on pace for, now it never really happens like this, especially when you're still in April, but Gunnar Henderson is on pace for 58 home runs this season. That is how well he's been hitting the baseball. And there's only been 2 other Orioles to have 10 or more home runs in the month of April. Brady Anderson, when he hit the 50 homers, and Frank Robinson. Those are the only 2 Orioles to do so. Yeah, Gunner's having an incredible start to his season. And then in the 8th inning, with 1 out, he gets hit by a pitch to go to first. Now, I held my breath after he got hit, but look, I got him in the meaty part of the forearm. He was fine. And then he ends up coming around and scoring that second key insurance run. It was kind of all Gunnar Henderson, because the 4th thing you need to know from the win Monday is that the rest of the offense was pretty much non-existent in this game. Jordan Westburg had a leadoff single in the 2nd inning, was then kind of oddly picked off in the inning. The Orioles did not have a hit between Westburg's single in the 2nd and Adley Rutschman's 1-out single in the 8th. They basically went like 5+ innings without a hit against Clark Schmidt and the Yankees bullpen. Not terrible at bats. Like, they only struck out 6 times on the night. They walked 3 times, so that's not terrible. But 8 hard hit balls isn't amazing, although 4 of them came in the 1st inning. They kind of hit Schmidt around in the 1st inning. Then after that, he settled in, and they didn't make a lot of quality contact. But sometimes, if you're not hitting it well, a little bit of luck can help you out. And you got to give a shout out to Gunnar Henderson, who took a risk with runners on 1st and 2nd and 1 out in the 8th inning on a fly ball to right field. Juan Soto has a good arm. He tagged up and got to 3rd with 2 outs, and that allowed him to score the 2nd run because Anthony Santander hit a ground ball to shortstop, which looked like a routine play to end the inning and keep it a 1-0 game into the 9th. And Anthony Volpe, who won the Gold Glove last year at shortstop for the Yankees, just boots an easy grounder. And because Henderson was at 3rd, he's able to score that 2nd run. So you will certainly take that. You're not going to see a lot of Volpe errors like that. And that was a huge insurance run for the O's. And the 5th and final thing you need to know from the Orioles 2-0 win over the Yankees on Monday night wasn't really a big thing, but I just kind of thought it was interesting. And it showed something about the Orioles' current roster dynamic and their current bullpen situation. I just mentioned the spot, 1st and 2nd, 1 out in the bottom of the 8th, Orioles up 1-0. So not the biggest point of the game. Like, no matter what happens, you're still going to be winning heading to the 9th, but you would love some insurance runs there, especially with the spot your bullpen is in. And Ryan O'Hearn was stepping to the plate with a left-handed pitcher in Caleb Ferguson on the mound for the Yankees. And throughout this season, Brandon Hyde pretty much across the board has pulled O'Hearn in favor of a right-handed hitter against left-handed pitchers. One of the big reasons why O'Hearn had so much success, had that breakout season with the Orioles in 2023, is because Brandon Hyde basically hid him from left-handers. He only had 29 plate appearances against lefties all of last season. He hid him from them. And I think that's a big part of his success. They said, don't even worry about hitting lefties, just focus on righties. And I think that was a step in the right direction. They've done the same thing this year. Coming into this game Monday, O'Hearn had only 4 plate appearances against lefties this year, but Brandon Hyde left him in the game to face the lefty. Now he flied out to right field on the first pitch. He is now 0 for 5 against lefties this year. No strikeouts, no walks, just 5 balls in play that ended up being outs. But I thought it was interesting because he usually goes to a pinch hitter there. You had, not the greatest options in the world on the bench, but you had Jorge Mateo, who hits lefties well. You had James McCann, who hits lefties well. And you have Ryan McKenna, who doesn't really hit anyone well, but in theory, he could hit lefties a little bit, or at least he once did. You had 3 righties on the bench you could have gone to. Now, one reason why Hyde felt like he didn't have to pinch hit is because O'Hearn was the DH on Monday night. So if he was playing the outfield, I would guess probably McKenna pinch hits and then would stay in for defense, but O'Hearn's the DH. And the other thing, the reason why I wanted to bring this up, it seems like not a big point in this game, is that I think some of the thinking, and we don't know if this is a fact, but some of the thinking from Brandon Hyde was, okay, this is a 1-0 game. Yeah, I don't love O'Hearn facing lefties, but whether or not he delivers, if he seemingly doesn't deliver, I might need Ryan O'Hearn again in this game. When you don't have Craig Kimbrel, you have a bullpen which has been a little overworked at the back end, and you've had a little bit of struggles from your pen. You're only up 1-0 against a really good Yankees order, and you don't have Kimbrel in the 9th. You're thinking there's a chance we might have to hit in the 9th or 10th inning, and there's a chance Ryan O'Hearn's spot might come up again. So would I rather have Ryan McKenna or Jorge Mateo there, or would I rather have Ryan O'Hearn? And I think for the first time, that thinking came in a little bit for Brandon Hyde. And I just think it's interesting how the bullpen situation kind of affects the rest of the team. And it showed a little bit of a different type of strategy from Hyde for leaving Ryan O'Hearn in the game there. Just kind of thought that was an interesting small minutia of the Orioles win on Monday. But one of the guys who did help them to that win on Monday was Cionel Pérez, who returned from the injured list to make just his 2nd appearance of the season. So coming up next, we'll talk about how Perez will fit into this bullpen and why the Orioles decided to option Dillon Tate to make room for Perez on the roster. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Now, there's a great time for sports right now. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL, unfortunately no longer for the Washington Capitals, but baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, and it's all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win at FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So the Orioles shut out the Yankees on Monday night with a 2-0 victory. Orioles' third shutout win of the season. Surprisingly, the Yankees' fifth shutout loss of the year as they tie things up again atop the AL East. And a solid part of that win for the Orioles out of the bullpen was Cionel Pérez, who made his second outing of the year, pitched a scoreless inning, allowed a hit on Monday night as he was activated off the 15-day injured list and added to the roster before Monday's game. Now, Perez has only pitched once so far this season because he went on the 15-day injured list back on March 31st. That was before the third game of the year with an oblique strain. And it was Perez who, it was back on March 30th, his first outing of the year. He had come in late in that blowout game against the Angels and just didn't look right, like was holding his side, gave up back-to-back hits, and came out of the game without recording an out. The next morning, he is placed on the injured list. And those oblique strains can be very painful and can keep you out for a long time. And it basically kept Perez out for about a month. But he did return and go on a rehab assignment last Wednesday in AAA Norfolk. And I talked about when he did about how when relievers go on rehab assignments, it can be as quick as like 1 or 2 rehab outings. They say, I feel good. Stuff looks good. They get reactivated. Sometimes it takes 4, 5, 6 before they're ready. For Cionel Pérez, it took 2. The rehab assignment was basically 4 days. He pitched an inning, allowed a run on 2 hits, no strikeouts, no walks, fastball looked solid in the Wednesday game. Then he pitched again Saturday, an inning and a third, scoreless, a hit, a strikeout, a walk, fastball 94, 96, kind of was focusing more on the slider in that outing. And the Orioles said after Saturday, how you feeling? Feeling good? All right, we'll give you the day off Sunday, and then we'll activate you Monday and put you back on the team. And that is exactly what they did. And it's nice to have him back. Now, he's not still the 2022 just dominant shutdown version of Cionel Pérez that we saw in his first season with the Orioles, but he's still an important piece of this bullpen. He threw 53 and a third innings out of the pen last year, 3.54 ERA, a really, really good 61% ground ball rate. You know, his 18% strikeout rate, 11% walk rate, probably walks too many guys, doesn't get a lot of Ks, but keeps the ball on the ground. And he was dynamite for the Orioles in the second half of last season. He was one of, if not their best reliever at times late last year. In the second half, in 23 innings, he had a 2.35 ERA with a 73% ground ball rate. Like, that's higher than Yennier Cano. That's like approaching Zach Britton levels of ground ball rate, what Cionel Pérez was doing late in the year. And he put together 23 consecutive outings without an earned run allowed in the later part of the 2023 season. Like, he's a very, very important piece of this bullpen. And I know he did struggle in the first half last year and people were concerned about him. But if you're looking at all the Orioles pitchers healthy and you're trying to put together a bullpen of their best 8 relievers, Cionel Pérez is going to be one of those best 8 relievers every single time, which to me means him being back makes this bullpen better. Now, the issue some people had is the corresponding move, and that corresponding move was Dillon Tate was optioned to AAA on Monday to make room for Cionel Pérez. And I saw a lot of people confused, angry, upset with the decision, saying, which was half right, Dillon Tate is not the worst reliever on this roster. I would agree with that. So why is he the one that loses his spot? Well, there's a lot of reasons that go into this. First of all, I think the bigger picture thing was, no matter what happened, Dillon Tate was going to find himself in AAA by Friday of this week at the latest, because with Perez coming back and John Means and Kyle Bradish both set to return this week, we'll get to that in our final segment, you're adding 3 pitchers to the roster in 1 week. And I got to tell you, no matter what, it seemed like Dillon Tate was going to be one of the three pitchers to lose his spot on the roster to make room for Perez, Means, and Bradish. So the question is, okay, why do Tate now? Why not hold on to a reliever who's been solid for a few more days and then eventually send him down when you actually absolutely have to? Well, the big reason is he's got options. And I did a whole episode about options and waivers and all that jazz, but basically, it comes down to this. There's only three relievers in the Orioles bullpen right now, or at least coming into Monday, who had options. Dillon Tate, Keegan Aiken, and Yennier Cano. Now, you're not optioning Yennier Cano. And if you compare Aiken and Tate, Keegan Aiken, in my opinion, has been better than Dillon Tate, has been used in more high leverage spots, way more high leverage spots than Tate so far this season. When you add that to the fact that Dillon Tate was not going to be available on Monday night, he pitched Saturday and he pitched Sunday. Brandon Hyde doesn't use anyone for 3 days in a row, and especially not Dillon Tate coming off a major arm injury where he missed all of last year. And quite frankly, because of that, Tate may have not been available on Tuesday as well with the back-to-back days. Hyde might have wanted to sit him 2 straight days before throwing him again. So you already have Craig Kimbrel, like we talked about, not on the IL, but not available for Monday, probably not available Tuesday either. It's really tough to know that you might be down 2 of your active relievers for back-to-back games against the New York Yankees in a huge spot in the division, even though it's April. So that was going to be tough. So you're thinking, yes, Mike Baumann and Yohan Ramirez are both worse than Dillon Tate right now. But both of those guys haven't pitched a lot lately and would both have been, if they would have needed them, available to pitch on Monday night. And Dillon Tate was not. Those guys don't have options. Tate does. That was just the easiest and most sensible move to make because it's tough to go with only 6 relief pitchers in that spot if you're going to do that. Now, I get it. The numbers have been good for Dillon Tate. 11 appearances, 12 and 2/3 innings. He's got a 2.84 ERA. He's only allowed 7 hits, 4 earned runs, but only 6 strikeouts to 6 walks. He's only allowed 1 homer. But when you look a little bit under the hood for Dillon Tate, you get kind of concerned. Despite a 2.84 ERA, his expected ERA is 4.79. That takes into account kind of the quality of contact against him and shows you he's been getting lucky. Also, at this point in the year, you don't want to have the same amount of strikeouts as walks. That is not good, and that is what Dillon Tate has. His command has been kind of off. Now, I thought his sweeper's been good, but here's the other couple of issues. One is Brandon Hyde still hasn't really used him in a high leverage spot at all. Like, he hasn't even gone to Dillon Tate with like a 2-run lead in the 7th yet. He really hasn't gone to him in any of those spots. I honestly think that in the pecking order, like even Jacob Webb was pretty clearly ahead of Tate in terms of high leverage spots. And so you could tell Hyde didn't nearly trust him to the level he did in 2021 and 22. And the other thing, he's still been effective, right? He's still had a very high ground ball rate and he's still getting outs, but that velocity is way down on that sinker, averaging 91.6 miles per hour on that pitch this year. In 2022, before the injury, he was averaging 94 miles an hour on that sinker. And although the pitch still moves well and still gets grounders, it's way more effective at 94 than it is at 91. That is a huge drop-off and is cause for concern. So you look at all those things under the hood, you look at his baseball savant page, it is all blue. That is not what you want from a relief pitcher you're going to trust. So it kind of made sense to just send him back down there and reset a little bit to try and see what is going on, if it is still the injury or it's something else. Now, he'll be back as long as he stays healthy, but he'll have to stay down in AAA for at least 15 days before he comes back, unless he does replace a separate injured player. And that was really the thing, right? He had the options. He wasn't going to be available. Ramirez and Baumann were going to be available. Now, it's interesting that Yohan Ramirez once again didn't pitch. Now, you could argue there really wasn't a spot for him, and you'd be right, but that's now 6 consecutive days off for Yohan Ramirez. If he's taking up a roster spot, like, at least pitch him. Like, why are you stashing away and hiding a bad reliever? Well, we might get the answer to that later this week because, as I mentioned, Means and Bradish are also coming back. The O's are going to have, officially, 2 more roster moves to make later this week. So coming up next to finish off the show, we'll talk about Means and Bradish returning, what it means for their roles, and who could lose their jobs later this week for the Orioles. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by DoorDash. We've got Mother's Day coming up, and it is never too late to show mom your love this Mother's Day with DoorDash. You can surprise your mom with flowers, gadgets, and self-care essentials all in one place, delivered right to her door. You can get thoughtful gifts she deserves with convenience you need. Choose same-day delivery or schedule a week ahead for when flowers and gifts could arrive to her door with DoorDash. You can shop with savings that would make her proud. With a DashPass membership, you'll save you will get a $0 delivery fee and reduce service fees on eligible orders from DashPass merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees apply and terms apply as well. So get all your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more on your next flower, convenience, grocery, or retail order now with code LOCKEDONMLB. That's code LOCKEDONMLB. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. So the Orioles win over the Yankees was fantastic on Monday night by a score of 2-0, but I would argue the even better news was the health news we got on the Orioles pitcher. It started with Cionel Pérez actually being activated to the roster, as we just talked about, and then it followed with Brandon Hyde talking to the media on Monday and telling us that both John Means and Kyle Bradish are in Baltimore. They were in the dugout Monday, and they will be activated to the Orioles roster at some point this week. Now, Hyde did not give an exact date for either Means or Bradish. What I can tell you is that Means' rehab assignment ends today, and I'm not sure how the activation process works there. I'm not sure if he has to be activated by Wednesday or he just can't pitch in a rehab game again until he's activated, so they might be able to wait a little bit longer. Either way, Means and Bradish are both coming back this week, and that is huge, huge news for the Orioles. So let's start with John Means, what the road back has been. Of course, he had Tommy John surgery in early 2022, then had a little bit of a back muscle issue that continued to delay him last year, but he finally returned in September, made 4 starts for the Orioles last September, was pretty good, took a no-hitter into the 7th in Cleveland, but then was scratched from the playoffs, had some elbow soreness, some forearm soreness. The Orioles decided to shut him down, and they really slow played him throughout the offseason. They wanted him to take it even slower, ramped him up later. So basically, he didn't pitch in spring training. Instead, his spring training was during April in AAA on his rehab assignment. And you could say that rehab assignment did not go super well. He made 6 starts in AAA Norfolk, and in 18 2/3 innings had an 8.68 ERA on rehab. Now, the stats are not nearly what's important on a rehab assignment. It's about, is your velo there? Is your stuff there? Is your command there? Are you feeling good physically? But he did allow 22 hits, although he struck out 22 and walked 7. He gave up 5 home runs. Now, 1 start on April 17th in AAA where he allowed 5 earned runs and only recorded 1 out, skewed that ERA a lot. But he made his final rehab start on Sunday in Norfolk, and he was flat out dominant. 7 scoreless innings, 1 hit, 8 strikeouts, 1 walk on 95 pitches, just 2 hard hit balls by the Braves AAA hitters, 13 whiffs for Means. I watched basically every pitch, went back and watched it, but watched basically every pitch from that rehab start in Norfolk on Sunday. The command looked really good. Like, he did the John Means thing that he does to right-handed hitters. It's fastballs kind of up or in, and then change-ups down and away. And although he wasn't getting everybody to strike out, he got 8 Ks, got a lot of soft grounders, got a lot of pop-ups. Like, that is vintage John Means. He worked in the curveball and the slider when he faced left-handed hitters, threw a few of them to righties, but it was mostly to lefties. And that's his usual attack plan. The fastball, the average was 91.2 miles per hour on the velocity. That's not so far down from what we've seen from John Means. He was 91.7 when he came back from the injury last year. That was also his velo before the injury in 2022 in those 2 starts. Now, in 2021, he was 92.8, and that was a good season for Means. He threw a no-hitter, but he also had a great rookie year in 2019 when he was 91.8 on the velocity. So really not that far off with fastball velo. It's not about the velo for John Means. When he's 91, 92, he still gets a whole lot of people out. It's more about the command, the feel for the changeup. That's his number 1 pitch, and it certainly looked like he had it on Sunday. So what will his role be? That is the big question now. He would be ready to start presumably on Friday. You get the 4 days rest. That would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off. Orioles have not named a Friday starter yet, so they wanted to put him in the rotation. The earliest they could do it is on Friday, and that's certainly a possibility, right? He got worked and built up back to be a starter. He threw 95 pitches at final rehab start on Sunday, and that's really always been John Means' role. When he first came to the big league, he was a reliever in 2019. Then he moved to the rotation quickly, and that's all she wrote after that. He was a starting pitcher. So maybe, it could be Friday night, but it's not a great spot for John Means. The Orioles go to Cincinnati this weekend. Besides Coors Field, Cincinnati is the number 2 hitters ballpark for home runs in all of baseball. John Means, still has a little bit of a home run problem. The Reds has some good right-handed hitters. That might not be a great matchup for John Means to return to for the Orioles. So I could see that eventually he could be in the rotation. Maybe he's also some sort of follower, long reliever. I'm not really sure what they're going to do with Means. They're going to activate him. I don't know. But what they do with Kyle Bradish could determine what they do for John Means, because Bradish, even more surprisingly than Means was just on a delayed timeline. We knew he was coming back by early May at the latest, right? Like we knew he was going to be back. Bradish had way more questions here. Had a UCL sprain, which is a partial tear of the UCL in your elbow while he was throwing and ramping up in January. Got a PRP injection, went for the rest instead of just going right for the Tommy John surgery. And he got back on the mound for rehab outings, went to AA on April 16th with 3 scoreless innings, then jumped up to AAA, had a little bit of a shaky rehab outing in AAA on April 21st, but then he started again on Friday in Norfolk, 5 innings, 1 run, 5 hits, 6 Ks, 1 walk, 77 pitches, 5 hard hit balls, 13 whiffs for Bradish. And I thought, hey, 1 more, maybe 2 more rehab starts, and then he's good to go. But Brandon Hyde said over the weekend, no. Kyle Bradish's next start will be in the big leagues. And I was kind of surprised by that, honestly. I thought, only up to 77 pitches, only 3 rehab starts. I thought at least 1 more, maybe 2 before you're sure he's ready. But part of the thinking for the Orioles could be, hey, he's pitching no matter what the PRP injection did and the rest did. Maybe it healed it a bit. You got to think he's somewhat pitching. And I'm not a doctor, but there was a partial tear, and I would think it's still somewhat there, is a partial tear in his UCL. It's hard to pitch like that. And I'm still very nervous, and the Orioles are still nervous, that there could be a bigger tear that could still happen, and Bradish could still eventually have to get Tommy John surgery at some point. So you might be thinking like, okay, if he feels good enough to throw, which he has, he said after every start, I'm feeling great, the arm feels great. If he's feeling good and the results are there and the stuff is there, why not send him out there, I guess? I mean, the velocity was 94.2 up to 95 on the fastball. That's not far off. He averaged 95 on his sinker last year, so not far off. Slider and curveball velo were down, but still good command on those pitches. Obviously, the slider is his number 1 offering. We'll see if it still is. If he's pitching with a partial tear in his UCL, that's something to watch as well. But the Orioles might just be thinking, look, we're still worried he might eventually have to get Tommy John surgery at one point. So if he's pitching like this with this partial tear, why waste the bullets in AAA? We've built him up enough to 75 pitches. He feels good. We know how good he can be. Let's just throw him out there in the big leagues and make our big league pitching staff hopefully better. That could just be the thinking here. And I think the general consensus now is Bradish is going to be activated on Thursday to start that game. The Orioles have starters named for Tuesday and Wednesday this week, as they'll have Dean Kramer go tonight. They'll have Corbin Burns go on Wednesday night. But the Thursday day game at 1:00 is currently TBA for the Orioles. And I mean, Kevin Brown said it on the air that the assumption is it's Kyle Bradish. It's looking like Kyle Bradish is going to start that game on Thursday and return to the Orioles. And I'm still very scared for what it's going to look like and how long he'll be able to stay healthy. But you know how much I love Kyle Bradish, and it's awesome to get him back somehow, some way in this Orioles rotation this week. Now, he was only up to 77 pitches last week on Friday, so probably no more than 85 to 90. He'll be on a pitch count. He'll be on a limit. I can't imagine he'll go more than 5 innings in that start Thursday. It could even be 4 innings if he gets the pitch count up. So maybe, just maybe, you activate Means and Bradish on the same day, and you use John Means as the follower to Kyle Bradish. You kind of have the big velocity, big strikeout, big slider guy for 4 innings, and then you go with the soft, fastball changeup lefty to go along with the righty for 2 or 3 innings. That could be a nice little plan of attack against this Yankees order on Thursday afternoon. And the other question, of course, is, okay, who leaves the rotation? It won't be Corbin Burns. It won't be Grayson Rodriguez. We know that. Dean Kramer coming off a good start. Cole Irvin, 13 2/3 innings scoreless his last 2 starts. Albert Suarez, 2 great starts, 1 shaky. It feels like, again, the consensus, Albert Suarez is probably going to the bullpen, and it looks like Bradish will get his spot. But Means is interesting because I don't think the Orioles really want to boot Kramer or Irvin from the rotation right now. And I don't know if you want to go with a 6-man rotation because A, you're putting more stress on the relievers because you now have 7 relievers instead of 8. And the other thing is you don't want to keep pushing Corbin Burnes back another day. You want him to pitch. You brought him in to pitch as much as possible. And I talked about it on yesterday's episode. You could have Burnes still pitch every fifth day and kind of factor in the other 5 pitchers around him. I think Bradish will have the spot if he's healthy, but Means is going to be interesting. We could see very much a swingman, some starts, some relief, like back and forth outings from Means until they figure things out. But the last question is, okay, that's who could lose their roster spots, or that's who could lose their rotation spots. It could be Suarez and Irvin. But even if it is, Suarez and Irvin would both just go to the bullpen. They would remain on the roster. Who's going to lose their roster spot? There's 4 moves they could make, and they have to make 2 of them. DFAing Mike Baumann, who's been really bad, and I don't want to watch him pitch anymore. DFAing Yohan Ramirez, hasn't pitched a whole lot, been shaky sometimes, but you can see why the Orioles like him. It's electric stuff. Optioning Keegan Aiken. Remember, only him and Cano, the only relievers in the bullpen with an option. It's not going to be Cano. So even though Aiken's been pretty good, it could be him. Or maybe eventually Craig Kimbrel, the back doesn't feel any better, and you feel like he should go on the injured list. Putting Kimbrel on the IL would also open up space. If I had to make a guess, my guess would be a DFA of Ramirez and a Kimbrel IL. Now, it's tough to just guess that somebody's going to feel bad and go on the IL, but with the back issue and not being available, I just think it could eventually happen. I think they still like Baumann enough to keep him around, because if they have to DFA him, remember, he's out of options. Another team is going to claim him. And if you option Keegan Aiken, remember, if you bring in Bradish and Means and say you DFA Ramirez and option Aiken, that leaves you with 1 pitcher in the bullpen with options, and it's Yennier Cano, a guy you're never going to send down. Because if Suarez and Irvin go to the pen, they're both out of options as well. It is a really tough spot to be in to have 7 of your 8 relievers not have options. That is no flexibility whatsoever. So I think that, plus Aiken being a lefty and pitching well, I just feel like he keeps his spot. It wouldn't surprise me, just like it didn't surprise me a lot that Dillon Tate got optioned. But my guess would be Kimbrel to the IL and DFA Ramirez. If Kimbrel's fine, it would be tight, but I think they might just pull the plug on Baumann as well and designate both of those guys for assignment. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see what the O's do. But here's the thing. These are good problems to have. When we were worried we wouldn't see Kyle Bradish all of this year, and all of a sudden you're getting Perez, Means, and Bradish all back in 1 week, things looking up for the Orioles pitching staff. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and a review wherever you listen. Like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. We will be back tomorrow recapping Game 2 between the Orioles and the Yankees. It's Nestor Cortes on the mound for the Yankees for a Tuesday night, 6:35 p.m. start. Cortes has been pretty solid this year. Remember, had the injury last year, just barely pitched, but 6 starts. He's got a 3.50 ERA on the year, coming off 7 innings of 3-run ball against the Oakland A's. And he will go up against Dean Kramer, who makes his 6th start for the Orioles, a 4.5 or a 4.61, I should say, ERA so far. Solid his last time out there against the Angels, 5 1/3 innings of 2-run ball, but better than solid was tied a career high with 10 strikeouts his last time out there. Would love to see him do that again on Tuesday. I will also be in the ballpark on Tuesday night, hanging out. So if you want to come say hi, you see me around the ballpark, say hi, come chat, Orioles, come chat, whatever, would be happy to chat with you. Love to see people at the game who listen to and enjoy the podcast. But I'll be back tomorrow recapping the Tuesday night game and getting you any more info we may have on this return of Means and Bradish. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.